when Navdeep Bains, it wasn't much of a time that I had been in media. Navdeep Bains was starting his political career at that time, and Navdeep Bains, he had to fight the nomination against Dev Toor. Dev Toor, is a big hotelier now. He's done very well in business. Dev Toor, Sukhdev Singh Toor, that's the full name. But that time they were fighting for nomination of the Liberal Party, and here comes Navdeep Bains winning the nomination, becoming a Liberal Party candidate. After that, Navdeep Bains, then he went on to become the Member Parliament, and then finally we all know he held some important positions, Navdeep Bains. But then after holding those important positions, Navdeep Bains, in 2011, everyone lost, and so did Navdeep Bains. He also lost as a Member Parliament because Conservatives formed a majority government in 2011. 2015, the Liberals from a third party status, they came roaring back, and one of the architects of that victory was Navdeep Bains. So he got a plum position. Many of his supporters, many of his, I would say, colleagues, they also got very important positions in 2015. Justin Trudeau, he had great relationship with Justin Trudeau. But then we all remember in 2021, he quit politics. He said, okay, fine. And actually, he was still the cabinet minister at that time. And if I can show you that image, if I'll request our team, they can show, he's coming out of the parliament with his wife and two daughters. And I interviewed Navdeep Bains at that time. I have interviewed Navdeep Bains many times. This is the picture which signifies when Navdeep Bains left politics, and I interviewed him. There were so many theories floating around, but he clearly told me, he said, Yudhvir, I'm leaving politics because of my daughters. They are quite young right now, and I have to devote time to them. So this was in 2021. He steps down as a cabinet minister. He leaves politics. He quits politics. And of course, Justin Trudeau appreciated that. That's fine. You've served us well. If you want to focus on your family, that's good. I'll show you another picture. Now his daughters have grown up. Another picture with wife and daughters. Now they've grown up. They're into the university now. And maybe he's thinking back once again. And there is a discussion. Our team was there at the Montreal Convention. We saw how Navdeep Bains were quite active over there. We have confirmed information that Navdeep Bains has been calling a few people. So Navdeep Bains seems like he's thinking about once again to join the Liberal leadership race. And we're talking Ontario Liberal leadership race over here. And the advantage with Ontario is that you don't have to travel that much back and forth to Ottawa. You go to Queen's Park. If you become the Liberal leader, you get a seat there as an MPP. Even if you're in opposition, you're still here in Queen's Park in Toronto. Navdeep lives here in GTA. So it's not too much of a travel. And then eventually, if Navdeep thinks that, okay, if he becomes the Premier of Ontario, there is still a lot of travel, but still on day-to-day basis, you are mostly in Greater Toronto area rather than Ottawa. So I think he would be able to juggle around his time between wife, two daughters, and giving time to his political life. But there is so much that we know. But before we go ahead, Ramona ji, I want your take. Navdeep Bains as the Ontario Liberal leader, we have held a question mark there because he hasn't even announced that he's running for the leadership race. But we have confirmed information. There are many discussions going around. He's called a few people. Please go ahead, Ramona ji.
Yeah, and it's actually great news. This was speculation for many years to come. We know that Navdeep Bains has served as chair in even very high positions when it comes to election time, provincially as well as federally. But his involvement has always been there provincially. And, I've heard it from many places over the years that this might be something that he would be thinking about. So to hear that, now that it's public, before it used to just be, and behind closed doors where you'd hear about it. But now that it's in the media, that means there's probably good speculation that he will announce. I think right now it's about fielding who will support him and to be able to start his bid. Essentially, we know that a leadership race means that they have to raise memberships, make sure that they have people on the ground to do those and then to get them out to vote. So, it's a grounds game operation, which, he's been very involved politically for decades, and he does have key people. So it's about activating that and, really being front and center. I think what's happened with the Ontario Liberals since their big defeat in 2018, where Kathleen Wynne lost after 15 years of Liberal rule to current Premier Doug Ford. Essentially, the Liberal Party has just been, going through a rotation of leaders, like a revolving door, right? They had Stephen Del Duca, who became the leader, and it was during COVID time, so he didn't really get a chance to really introduce himself to Ontarians. Essentially, if you recall, during COVID time, we had the Premier on TV every day. So that kind of overshadowed any other leadership hopefuls, any other leader hopefuls in different parties when election time came. So we know Stephen Del Duca didn't do so well. He's doing well now as the mayor in the city of Vaughan, but in that election, not so well. And then we had Bonnie Crombie come in, and it was speculated that she would really, have a name recognition in the GTA at least, and be formidable. It's hard because when a political party has a new leader, it takes some time for the Ontarians to know who this leader is, what their values are. And it's really hard to go against an incumbent who's on TV and who's dealing with issues. So when it came to Bonnie Crombie's time, well, essentially that was when the Trump tariffs happened. And then therefore Premier Doug Ford was on TV again almost every day. If you recall, he was chairing the premiers across Canada for, what would be the Trump tariffs, and they took a delegation out onto Washington, D.C. to do something about tariffs. So then again, Premier Doug Ford was on the top of the narrative in terms of looking to him as for solutions and answers from the public as well as the media. So that really, again, put Bonnie Crombie's campaign in a different light because she didn't get the same level of attention. So now, and then we know she lost her seat, and then she's left. So now it's Navdeep Bains, who has name recognition in Toronto ridings, of course, GTA ridings when it comes to Peel region, some of Vaughan. So therefore, it's a matter of making sure that, is he going to be able to sell memberships? I think so. Is he able to have a ground operation to be able to pull out the votes? I think so. But then again, it's always about the timing of what happens internationally or nationally to see with the current news. During Stephen Del Duca's time, it was COVID. During Bonnie Crombie's time, it was the Trump tariffs. And now it seems like maybe there won't be another issue. And it also begs the question, will Premier Ford run a fourth election? We know that in Ontario history, it was very rare for a political party to win a third term. So it'll be interesting to see if this premier wants to go for a fourth term. If he does, of course, we're going to watch it. If he doesn't, then there's also speculation of how, that's going to start also a leadership race in the PCs. So potentially in the next election, we could see two new leaders from the PC side and the Liberal side. That's to be seen.
Yeah, and once again, just in case you haven't heard, just for our viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you once again that the Liberal Party's leadership race, July 31st, 5 p.m., that's the deadline. So we still have some time, and there are many names floating around, as you all know, and as Ramona ji also discussing. Member of Parliament Nate Ken Smith, is he going to join the race? His name is coming up. I met Adil Shamji at a recent event, not sure. His name is also coming up. Navdeep Bains, that's what we're discussing right now. So let's see what are the official names that come out. So before July 31st, we'll know who has joined the race, who has dropped, or who has said no. So after July 31st, of course, there'll be a membership drive, and then the final voting will be from 9th of November till 20th of November. And 21st November this year, 21st November 2026, the Liberal Party will be electing their leader. Since I joined media as a professional journalist, most of the time the Liberals were in power from 2003 till 2018. And we saw an era of Dalton McGuinty, Kathleen Wayne. I interviewed her many times here in this studio, there as well. And one of those leaders who I would really enjoy interviewing. Of course, under her leadership, Liberals were decimated to just 7 seats, 20% in the vote share. That's what I also would. But one of those leaders, I would enjoy interviewing her all the time because she really has her facts correct. And talking about facts and interviewing, I can recall in 2015, at one time, Navdeep Bains and I had a massive debate on TV live where he was saying that the Conservative Party has left a $1 billion deficit. I was saying it was a $1 billion surplus, but in a $2 trillion economy, does it really matter? It's a $1 billion deficit or a surplus. And looking at today's, if we look at today's budgets, where there are billions, 30, 35, $40 billion deficits. I love to talk to him again. It's always good to talk to Navdeep on air, off the air. And I clearly remember, after that, he calls me in the evening and he says, Yudhvir, I hope you didn't mind. I said, no, whatever happened on the air. And, you were just putting your point across. I was putting mine across. It was a nice banter. That's okay. So I'll ask Ramona ji. Ramona ji, what do you think? What will be the strengths of Navdeep Bains? Of course, he's a team player. He has a massive following. He's good at fundraising as well. The picture I was showing regarding Paul Martin, even at that time, he used to raise good funds. Fundraising is good. He's widely known across Canada. But of course, he has his challenges too. Because when you rise at that level, you make a few enemies. And this case, I think he's made a lot of enemies as well. And I clearly remember this, that here in 2011, there was a lot of community members who tried to make sure that Navdeep Bains loses his seat. 2 big seats. Of course, Gurbaksh Malli lost his election, Navdeep Bains, but 2 big names, John McCallum on the east and Navdeep Bains on the west. They would always win. But 2011, they both lost. But I clearly saw a strong undercurrent when people were making sure that they wanted Navdeep Bains to lose. So he's made a lot of friends as well, a lot of enemies. What do you think here Navdeep Bains' strengths are there, and what would be the challenges for Navdeep Bains?
Yeah, when you've been in politics for quite some time, yeah, you do make a lot of friends and enemies, but he's had a cool-off period where he's now distanced himself enough away from the Trudeau government, all the stuff that happened, really, he's not associated in the same way in terms of when it comes to the voters' minds in general. And so what are his strengths? Well, his strengths are that he stayed active behind the scenes. We know that. So it's not that he took a complete break and then now he's trying to relaunch. I had a really good friend of mine who's been in politics for quite some time explain to me that politics is like being in sports, right? And that you need to be playing all the time. And the second you take a break, it's going to be very hard to get up to the stats you had when you were a professional athlete. So same thing in politics, right? Like you cannot take a break for even a few years. Like we saw that happen with Peter MacKay when he left in that 2015, right before that election, the Harper government, and he went into the private sector for about 5 years. He came back to run for leadership, and then we saw him lose to Erin O'Toole. And here's Peter MacKay, who was a co-founder of the Conservative Party, and with his massive roles during that Harper era compared to Erin O'Toole. So we do know that you need to stay involved, and from my understanding, Navdeep Bains has been involved when it comes to mobilization and when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to election period, all of that. Outside of the election period, I'm not sure, but that would be for Liberal insiders to comment on. So we know that's the case. We know that when it comes to the Indian community, they can sell memberships. I mean, it's not something we're just saying in a very slight way. It's a very serious thing. When you look at Brampton nominations, you have thousands of memberships, right? Tens of thousands of memberships. And then for nomination days, thousands of people show up. So we know that it is a community that can organize. So based on his challengers, will they stand the same chance as him? that he can sell memberships at that rate, and then getting out the vote, right? So one thing is selling memberships, they're going to probably sell, tens of thousands, if not close to 100,000 memberships, which is what you really need to do. From that, you're looking at about 1/3 showing up to vote. And that's when you have key people in different ridings. And that's the other thing. There's going to be rules in terms of how many points each riding is worth. So there's going to be a strategy. This is a strategic game. It's an actual strategic operation, right? And you need to understand the lay of, like, first the rules and how to be able to use the rules to win, right? So you get let's just say he's going to do 100,000 memberships, which he should be able to do. And then from that, you have to see where you're strong. We know that the Liberals, usually have the Toronto area. He'll be able to pull out his votes in the 905s. And then it's all about the Northern Ontario bases, but those will be those ridings will have, perhaps based on the number of memberships that they sell, it'll be. I know how it is when it comes to the PCs or the Conservatives, where it's based on a point system. I would have to check to see what the Liberals will do. But if it is based on a point system, then you're going to make sure that you get, your concentration of efforts in the ridings where there's less Liberal members because each vote will count just the same as some of the higher volume members in different ridings. So based on that entire strategy in terms of the ground game, making sure you're going to have captains in key regions, you're going to break up, Ontario in, the east, the west, the north, and of course Southern Ontario, and then having captains in those areas that'll be responsible for not only selling memberships but getting out to vote. And underneath those captains, you're going to have soldiers that are going to be able to be responsible for key ridings. So it is a strategy, right? And he seems to be very fit to understand and know that strategy because he's been doing it for so long. So in terms of his strengths, those will be his strengths that will help him win this leadership, in my opinion. And that's what it is. It's the strategy first, policy second, right? But when it comes to policy, we know that he can say many different things, right? When it comes to affordability, when it comes to so many different things, having the PCs in power for so long, it'll almost be equivalent to having the same record under the Liberals. When a party is in power for so long, there's a lot to pick at, right? Sometimes when you're not an incumbent, you have the opportunity to really look at the incumbent's record. In this case, it's going to be the Liberal leader looking at the PC record and really asking Ontarians, what did they get in the years that it's been under PC rule? Just like we saw the PCs do that to the Liberals, right, under Kathleen Wynne. So all of that will be on his side as well when it comes to policy talking points. And we know he's intelligent. We know he's well spoken. We know he's articulate. So when it comes to mainstream media, he's going to do very well. When it comes to ethnic media, he'll do very well. When it comes to debates, he'll still do very well. We also know that when he was the minister on Parliament Hill, he probably had the most meetings when it comes to organizations and lobbying groups. So we know he's also very connected in the business world. So what that means for fundraising for him, what that means for getting out the vote, what that means for getting volunteers. And essentially, this might revive the Liberal leadership momentum in a way where, a lot of Canadians will want to come out. Sorry, not Canadians, Ontarians will want to come out and be part of a campaign that they see could go head to head with an incumbent. And that is if there is still going to be an incumbent on the PC side when we roll around to a general election in Ontario.
Yeah. And to sum up, I can say Navdeep Bains has seen it all, whether it's the corporate world, whether it's the business world, and in politics as well. I know as a rookie MP, when he traveled to India, he made some very bold remarks there in front of Shri Kal Takht Sahib's Jathedar, and then there was an issue of recognizing the same-sex marriage that was very important. In India, he was instructed differently, but then he came here. He supported, the legislation of same-sex marriage. Not only he supported, but he worked very closely with the then Prime Minister Paul Martin at that time. And of course, we know that after that, when Stephen Harper, came as the Prime Minister, So he had to sit in the opposition benches, but he still won his seat in 2006, in 2008, 2011. Eve Adams won. There was a conservative wave. They won the majority, and there was a lot of support for Eve Adams, as I mentioned earlier, mainly because at that time many people, wanted Navdeep Bains to lose. But then he comes back in 2015, and interestingly, by around 2017, I was reading an article, and in this article, they're saying the 50 most powerful and influential people in Canada. 50 most, okay? Number one, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, fine. And then at number 2 or 3, we know it was Katie Telford and Jerry Butts, okay? Jerry has been, a good friend of Trudeau. Katie Telford and Jerry Butts, they mainly run the affairs at the Prime Minister's office. They have a lot of power. But then I would expect a finance minister or a foreign affairs minister at number 4 minimum. But here at number 4, I was reading that article, and I spoke a lot about that on our radio and here on Channel Y as well. It was quite interesting to see that number 4 position was occupied by none other than Navdeep Singh Bains, ahead of foreign minister or any other cabinet minister or anybody else. And there were a lot of names in that power and influence list in 2017 that was released by the Hill Times. They had a magazine at that time. So he had risen to that much power by 2015, 16 and 17. And of course, later on also he enjoyed a lot of power in the Trudeau cabinet as well, in different ministries, whether it was a Treasury Board, whether the Minister of Innovation and Science. But he held a lot of power. We all know that. But now he's been out of politics for some time. So how is he going to make a comeback? Of course, he has a lot of support. There are many of his supporters. They are all ready to support him. They are quite excited. So on one side, there are a lot of supporters. They want to see Navdeep Bains as the Liberal leader. They want to see him as the Ontario Premier. So there's a lot of support for him on one end. On the other end, I know quite a few people who won't support him. They would disagree with him. So let's see how it goes. But nevertheless, the Liberal Party leadership race is going to be very, very interesting. Ramona ji, your final comments before we move on to our next topic.
Yeah, I mean, great points about him. Just watching his career, even in the House of Commons, like he was never really answering questions in a sense where, when you saw the debates that take place in the House of Commons with the official opposition being the Conservative Party, really asking questions when it comes to even his portfolio, he had, another MP really answer and fielding those. So, that's what was so very strategic about him, because, you didn't see him headlining on debates like you saw, current leader Pierre Poilievre. Even before he was the leader, Pierre Poilievre would really make headlines in terms of his debating style. So you never saw much of that with Navdeep Bains, but then you knew that he had that level of power because he was in that inner circle, having the Prime Minister's ear, again, like listing him as the most top influential, powerful people. So he has that air of him, and he's taken very seriously in terms of like not a lightweight at all, somebody very experienced and somebody who's also very strategic, right? Because even when there was the massive scandals that took place with the Liberal Trudeaus, he was rarely caught up in it in the same way, or really had to answer to it like the other MPs or ministers had to. So that's very interesting in terms of how he navigated those, and it'll be interesting to see how he's going to navigate, his future in provincial politics.
So thank you so much for that, and we will carry on our coverage at Ymedia Political Sensex, whether it's the federal politics, whether it's the provincial politics, and we have the municipal elections also this year. So from federal to municipal to provincial, right here on Ymedia platforms, on Channel Y, Rogers 857, Bell 828, Telus 247, Ignite 707. So Ymedia is there on all platforms right across Canada. If you are watching in US, we are on Dish Network, on Sling, so you can watch Channel Y in US as well. 24/7 all English channel Y+. So Y Media's 24/7 all English channel, Y Plus, stay tuned with that, and also channel Y. Other than that, all these issues are discussed live on our radio, Radio Y FM 105.9. So whenever you're driving anywhere, please do save in your favorites Radio Y FM 105.9, and do not forget to pick a copy of the biggest free English newspaper in Canada. Yeah, it's the biggest free English newspaper in Canada, Midweek newspaper. We'll move on to our next topic, but here's a copy of this week's edition. So wherever you are, do not forget to pick up a copy of this week's edition. On the front page, you see lots of news. There was a very important community event. We are covering that. The talks failed in Pakistan. So why they failed, we're talking that. 3 wins by the Liberal Party, a clean sweep. And then, of course, there are a lot of Y Media foreign policy reports as well. So on the inside pages, there's lots on sports, lifestyle. So don't forget to pick your copy of Midweek newspaper.
Y Media Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.